Hey everyone, welcome back. Or if you're just joining us, welcome to KSSP Podcast. I'm Spencer.
And I'm Katie.
And in this part of our food waste, food loss series, we're just going to be talking about why it matters, why we should care. So, to start, decreasing food waste can lessen the need for new food production, shrinking projected deforestation, biodiversity loss, greenhouse gas emissions, water pollution, and water scarcity. Food waste results in a waste of resources, including the agricultural land, water, pesticides, fertilizers, and energy, and the generation of environmental impacts, including these greenhouse gas emissions and climate change, consumption and degradation of freshwater resources, loss of biodiversity and ecosystem services, and degradation of soil quality and air quality. Implementation of food waste solutions has the potential to generate $73 billion in annual net financial benefit, recover the equivalent of 4 billion meals for food insecure individuals, save 4 trillion gallons of water, and avoid 75 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions annually. And we're also going to mention the adverse effects of current practices as to why it matters.
So the way we harvest, produce, process, market, transport, and consume food can make farming difficult for smallholder farming or smallholder farms. Smallholder farms are agricultural holdings that are smaller than a farm, and they produce 80% of the food that we eat. Yet they remain in poverty and face challenges from conflict, climate change, and even the COVID-19 pandemic. Food and agriculture make up roughly 1/3 of greenhouse gas emissions and are the main cause of soil degradation and biodiversity loss.
And then we'll talk about water, and with that, contaminated water. And to do that, we're going to have to talk about nitrogen fertilizer runoff. Nitrogen/fertilizer runoff. So, nitrogen fertilizer over application and leaving the soil bare. Under these conditions, on typical Midwestern farms, large amounts of applied nitrogen can leach through the soil, run off fields, and end up in waterways and drinking supplies. Nitrogen and phosphorus can run downstream from farm fields, ending up in coastal waters and the Great Lakes, where it decimates fish and shellfish numbers. Coastal waters, including the Gulf of Mexico and the Chesapeake Bay, are plagued by hypoxia, a phenomenon in which aquatic ecosystems are deprived of oxygen because of rapid microbial growth due to excess nutrients, including nitrogen, which, as we just mentioned, has negative impacts on fish and shellfish. Toxic algae blooms due to excess nutrients are also causing problems for coastal tourism and recreation. It's expensive to treat water contaminated with any of this fertilizer runoff. The USDA Economic Research Services has estimated the annual cost of removing nitrate from U.S. water supplies exceeds $4.8 billion. It's estimated that if we reduce nitrate concentrations in source waters by just 1%, that could help reduce water treatment costs by $120 million per year. And then we just have... So this is I guess you could call it an article, sort of, from the EPA. And it's estimated nitrate concentrations in groundwater used for drinking. So nitrate in groundwater drinking water systems is of concern because private self-supplied drinking water systems, which primarily draw from groundwater, are not federally regulated. It is the owner's responsibility to test and treat their own well for nitrate and other pollutants. While nitrate does occur naturally in groundwater, concentrations greater than 3 milligrams per liter generally indicate contamination. And a more recent nationwide study found that concentrations over 1 milligram per liter of nitrate indicate human activity. EPA's maximum contaminant level or MCL. For nitrate, set to protect against baby blue syndrome, or blue baby syndrome, is 10 milligrams per liter. The data in this indicator show the total area and percent of state area predicted to have nitrate concentrations exceeding this, or actually not exceeding the 10 milligrams, exceeding 5 milligrams, which is half of the EPA's MCL, in groundwater used for drinking. Also presented is the estimated percent of state population served by self-supplied drinking water, 98% of which is from groundwater wells. So I'm not going to go through every state here, but I'll let you guys kind of go through, or pause, I guess, or I'll have it set up somehow to where you guys can see and then can pause it and kind of find your state, and then it'll tell you the estimated area of state with groundwater nitrate concentrations above the 5 milligrams, estimated percent of state area with groundwater nitrate concentrations above. Okay, so the first one is miles squared. The second column is percentage. And then the last column is estimated percent of population with self-supplied drinking water. So there's that chart. And then we'll talk about air quality and global warming. And why that's important is because methane gets released from food in landfills. According to the EPA, food is the single largest category of material placed in municipal landfills, where it emits methane, a powerful greenhouse gas. Municipal solid waste landfills are the third largest source of human-related methane emissions in the United States, accounting for approximately 14.1% of these emissions in 2017. The greenhouse gas emissions embodied in the food wasted by consumers and consumer-facing businesses account for more than 260 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year, which is equivalent to the annual emissions of 66 coal-fired power plants. Food waste prevention policies have the potential to annually divert nearly 7 million tons from landfills while generating more than $27.4 billion each year in net financial benefit. And excess nitrogen can also volatilize into the air. When food waste breaks down, it also produces nitrogen, which, when exposed to air, forms nitrate, which can then leach into the groundwater, as we talked about before. So then we'll talk about some harmful effects from fertilizers, which include ozone damage to crops and forests, acidification and over-enrichment of aquatic ecosystems, impairment of public drinking water supplies, biodiversity losses, visibility impairing haze, global warming. It's estimated that nitrogen from agriculture costs Americans $157 billion a year in damages to both human health and the environment. And you may be wondering, what about human health? Well, diseases, due primarily to the reduction of ingested nitrate. So basically, when you ingest nitrate, which is what we've been talking about, it gets turned into nitrite. That nitrite then reacts with hemoglobin to form methemoglobin, which does not transport oxygen to the tissues or to the rest of your body. Nitrate contamination in the drinking water has been linked to some other illnesses, such as blue baby syndrome, as we mentioned, various types of cancer, as we mentioned, and inflammatory bowel disease. And another reason why this matters, why food loss and waste matters just in general, is that because people, as we have briefly mentioned, there's a lot of food insecure people in America. And I have here just a brief excerpt, I guess you could say, from the USDA food security article link, and that just kind of talks about food insecurity. So, USDA supports global food security through in-country capacity building, basic and applied research, and support for improved market information, statistics, and analysis. With 870 million people around the world who do not have access to a sufficient supply of nutritious and safe food, establishing global food security is important not only to hundreds of millions of hungry people, but also to the sustainable economic growth of these nations and the long-term economic prosperity of the United States. As we help countries become more food secure and raise incomes, we also expand markets for American producers. U.S. agricultural exports to developing countries in Southeast Asia, Central America, and Sub-Saharan Africa have grown at more than twice the annual rate as compared to developed countries. U.S. poultry meat exports to Sub-Saharan Africa expanded 180% from 2009 to 2011. Given population growth and rising incomes, it is estimated that the demand for food will rise by 70 to 100% by 2050. To meet this need, the United Nations estimates that production in developing countries will need to almost double.
So as of 2022, we globally produce about 150% more food with just 13% more land compared with what we were producing in 1960. Many innovations in food production we've made since then have contributed to this. We could feed 1.5 times the global population, or 10 billion people, with the amount of food we currently produce. And 2.3 billion people in the world were moderately or severely food insecure, while almost 3.1 billion people could not afford a healthy diet in 2020. One misconception about food insecurity is that it only includes hunger. And while hunger is a large portion of this, food insecurity also does include micronutrient deficiencies and being overweight or obesity.
And when food is wasted, so too is the land, water, labor, energy, and other inputs that are used in producing, processing, transporting, preparing, storing, and disposing of the discarded food. Water use while raising animals and growing crops is extremely intensive. Agriculture accounts for 70% of the world's water use. And food losses translate into lost income for farmers and higher prices for consumers, giving us an economic incentive to reduce food waste. And researchers estimate that halving U.S. food loss waste could reduce the environmental footprint of the current cradle-to-consumer food supply chain by more than 300,000 square kilometers, or 75 million acres, of agricultural land, which is an area greater than Arizona, 12 trillion liters, or 3.2 trillion gallons of blue water, which is equal to the annual water use of 29 million American homes, nearly 290,000 metric tons, or 640 million pounds, of bioavailable nitrogen from agricultural fertilizer with the potential to reach a body of water, cause algal blooms, and deteriorate water quality. 940 million GJ, or 262 billion kWh of energy, enough to power 21.5 million US homes for a year. 92 million metric tons of CO2, equal to the annual CO2 emissions from 23 coal-fired power plants. These savings are only able to be achieved through prevention, though. Recycling of food waste, while still important, cannot achieve these benefits since a substantial fraction of the impacts, all the like the land and the water and all that, is used during the primary production of food. So while recycling wouldn't we wouldn't see those results with recycling initiatives alone. Recycling initiatives are still good to look at, but it's also important to look at as well things that we can do in the beginning stages, I guess I would say. And speaking of that, we will be talking about that in the next episode. So, as always, you can leave a comment below if you have any topic ideas that you want to hear us talk about in future episodes.
You can reach out to us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok. We also occasionally live stream on Twitch, so follow us there to figure out what we do.
And don't forget to give this video a like, as well as follow or subscribe to our other social media accounts and turn on notifications so that you get notified when our new content comes out. Otherwise, we will see you all in the next video.